Hello, hello. I'm here today with Corey. Corey is CEO and founder of Aspireship. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Thanks, Karim.
Thanks
Happy to be
for
here.
yeah, thanks for being with us. I know that we had a lot of conversations on LinkedIn and we exchanged some messages, but also some comments on some posts, and we align a lot with a lot of values. So I was very happy to reach out and get you on board with this chat about work is not working. And I have a lot of questions for you. But I think if we start with this big, bold statement of why work is not working and how long can we keep it this way, and what are the main things that customers or companies should be doing to avoid this great resignation, to avoid this burnout, the workload, et cetera, et cetera. Where should we start?
Yeah, absolutely. So my big thing, and this is part of why I'm doing what I'm doing now, is the reason that I believe work is not working primarily is that companies have over-indexed on past experience, the specific jobs you've held in the past at specific types of companies serving specific types of customers, and so on and so forth, is the primary criteria for whether or not you're going to score an interview and then eventually land a job or continue moving up or whatever in an organization. And I believe that that is incredibly limiting for companies and for the people that want to make new changes in their careers.
Amazing. I think, yeah, like there's a lot to speak about here, because I think the first thing I wanted to say is kind of this potential versus skills. So what is more important for a job, maybe from your perspective? Is that potential something that companies are able to test, or are we just always looking at the confidence in the skills themselves that they have been proven in the past?
Yeah, so I think that all of those things are important, and there's a few questions in there. The first being, what's more important, potential or skill? I absolutely believe it depends on the role, but especially if you're thinking about people who are earlier in their careers, or they're looking at a role that is more on the junior to mid-level, and not like an executive role or something like that. Potential is going to outweigh skill for me. However, when most people talk about this concept, and you'll see the LinkedIn post where somebody says like, oh yeah, somebody who was a bartender came to me and they had no experience and we just hired them and they've been the best employee ever. Like, that's not a scalable way to do things. It's not something that's repeatable that we can rely on, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not as simple as that. It is a blend of potential and skill. But the thing that's been happening for a very long time across industries and across jobs and so on is that companies have said, hey, especially in roles that turn over a lot, especially like sales as an example, companies have said, this is really hard, like to get the right people, and then for them to become productive and them to stick and them to not leave on their own and all of those things. It's so hard. So what are we going to do? Let's default to, if I'm a company that sells software to automotive repair shops, find me everybody that's sold software to auto repair shops for at least X amount of time from these 5 companies, and let's go poach them over, right? And that is the playbook of recruiting really all over. And it just flat out doesn't work for a variety of reasons, and leaves a big chunk of the workforce out that could do these jobs really well.
Yeah, there is a big risk with this strategy, I guess, because sometimes it is very hard to make someone unlearn something they have learned with that same job. And it takes you as a company much more work to unlearn these skills or unlearn these processes, approach to something, if it does not align with your values as a company. So maybe the risk of having someone coming from that same profile in another company is much higher than bringing them from a different industry or a different even experience that comes and adds value to your process, rather than actually trying to be unlearning what they have done.
Yeah, I believe in that. And I'll also add that it's not necessarily that those people that you would find are going to be bad fits for one reason or another. They might be great fits. It's that if you think about the opportunity cost of the people that you're passing up because they don't have that thing that you think they need, that's where that's where these multipliers in business, are left on the table, right? And you think about the people that you may have hired in the past. I certainly know that I've hired where you intelligently can spot and you ask, can you test for this? And I think there is a way to, it's not universal, but like there's things that can be developed, and we've been working on some stuff in this area. But if you're able to realistically identify what this looks like, then when those people do come on board, they're just multipliers for the business, right? They're all in behind you, they're loyal, they're working their butts off, like all of those things. And if you have the right blend of everything, it can be a really special combination.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what about the other audience in this big picture, or like the impact of hiring outside of your business on the existing employees that could have these skills because they know your company very well, but they are not within that department or that function yet? How do you feel about these people, and how can we actually enable them to become what we want to be hiring for, and taking more risks on them instead of actually always looking at the grass that is greener outside?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And this is an enormous problem as well. It just flat out is, especially in, I would say in larger organizations, which by my standard of larger, I mean, I'm talking hundreds of employees, let alone thousands or tens of thousands, which, we know there's plenty of those out there. But the reality is companies love to talk the talk, right? Like, we're a place you can grow and progress. And a lot of times that's true. But what most companies will say is, all right, if you are in customer support and you do an amazing job, you can find your way into a customer success role someday. If you're in customer success, maybe you can find your way to something very, very similar right in that niche, even if they're in the first 2 or 3 years of their career. And they're like, hey, I've actually done amazing at this job. Like, I love the company, all that stuff, but this just isn't for me. I want to go do this. And I really believe I could be good at it. And I'm willing to learn everything I want to learn. And I'll show you, I'll work hard. I won't name names of where or anything, but I've been in companies where people would come to me and they would ask for these types of opportunities where I wasn't in a position to give it to them, but I was in a position to have the ear of all the leaders and all the departments and all that stuff and say, hey, this person's fantastic. Can we give them a shot? And 9 times out of 10, they didn't even get an interview internally for a relatively entry-level position in a different department.
Yeah, this is insane. I think they are like the horizontal shift and also the vertical shift. So maybe we should tackle them one after another. The horizontal shift is, okay, I'm in customer success, but I can be the best product manager ever because I know the product, I know the customer. How can I do this shift? And the other one is, I'm really passionate about people, but I have never managed, and I want to manage people. And then the first answer would be, oh, but you didn't manage. You need to prove experience in management. But this is where I am today. So how do we actually help people on the horizontal shift and maybe the vertical shift, in your opinion?
Yeah, and also I just, not to overcomplicate it, but I just want to add one piece as well, and that is the industry shift. So if you think about, so in our case, one of the big things we tackled early was if people have sales experience, but they haven't sold in tech or in the software industry. Right now, that's a limiter, has been a limiter in this world is, hey, we need people with SaaS experience. And so just overcoming that hurdle is its own thing as well. But if you go back to the horizontal and vertical thing, I mean, I think for horizontal is the biggest, probably the biggest challenge, because it's such a change in scope and perspective. And also, if you think, I love to think about the analogy of like Hollywood actors, right? Of like your typecasts. Like Jim Carrey isn't serious. Like Jim Carrey is a funny guy. Like, don't come to me for the drama role, Jim, right? And that happens in work. It happens to most of us in one way or another. And so I think the number one thing is companies have to open their minds to this first, but they also need to be shown a path to do it, not just, us spouting at them like, hey, hire people that don't look like, you want them to look, and so on. So I think that's the first thing. The horizontal piece for sure has a lot to do with learning the skills, the mindset, and from a candidate perspective or internal employee perspective, you can't just expect that these opportunities will come to you because you say, hey, I did a good job at something else and now I want you to just take a blind leap of faith. You have to take steps to show that you're really serious about this and that you can start to understand what you need to know to be competent in that role when you start, or at least shortly after. You need to show people in your company a path.
So for the employee, take the initiative, try to prove yourself indirectly on a job that you want to position yourself in. But for the employer, it is extremely important to change or accept that you have changed perception of people from the day they joined to how they evolved. That's something I think it's very important and it's very hard for employers, is to change your perception of someone over time, because very often you see the person as the first day they joined and not really see their evolution in your company, and you're stuck in your mind with, oh, this is what they were hired for, this is how junior they were, and you don't give them these opportunities because 3 years ago that's how you remembered them.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, if you think about many leaders, especially kind of, it makes me feel old to say this, but like in this day and age, right? Where it's just go, go, go all the time. You may have good intentions for someone, but at a certain point, you may lose sight of what's going on with them or really what they really want, or they may not speak up, or you're like, hey, I have all these priorities and these burning things. Like, I want to help you on your path, but it may not be top of mind all the time. And so what ends up happening in most cases is that leaders or companies will wait until it's the dire situation in the 11th hour where they're going to go take something that was offered to them and they're trying to scramble and match, and that just never works.
Yeah. Is my assumption right if I say that most of the turnover in companies and people leaving is that career path missing from the employee perspective, and not getting satisfied with at least this kind of like appreciation of who they are and what value can they bring to a company?
Yeah, I think it's the number one reason. In fact, I've run some polls on LinkedIn over time, especially as the pandemic started and all these different crazy things happened. It was very interesting to see where people's heads were at, and it's evolved a bit. So I think that's number one. I think it always has been. A close second is this whole concept about like flex work, whether it's remote or I don't want to be in the office every day, or I don't want a certain culture. The pandemic has made people very aware of how they look at work, how they look at their lives and what they want to be spending their time doing. And in many cases, we've seen it's emboldened candidates and employees in ways that I've certainly never seen in my lifetime. Sometimes rightfully so, and other times like way overboard in terms of, hey, give me another $50,000 or I'm not coming into work on Monday, right? Things that are a little out there. So yeah, I do think that that's number one, but it's been very, very interesting to see how things have unfolded the last couple of years.
All right, a couple of maybe controversial questions or prediction questions at the same time. The first one is, what is the biggest status quo that you would reject when it comes to career opportunities, career development, and companies hiring or not hiring?
Yeah, so I think that companies need to rethink the way in which they assess talent, period. The old way of how similar are you or was your past job to exactly what I think this job is or is going to be, or others that I've seen, do this job. It just doesn't work. It certainly doesn't work at scale, and it leads to way too much turnover and just dissatisfaction in the workforce as a whole. And so it's a complicated subject, but I think that companies need to look at characteristics, qualities, drive, motivation paired with competencies, and really be able to figure out how to test for that in a realistic way, as opposed to like, hey, you need these kind of requirements, X years of experience. I mean, we can go on and on about this. We go into bachelor's degrees and, industry experience, whatever. There's a million and one things that companies ask for today, but they're all just Band-Aids for the big problem, which is I don't know how to adequately assess whether or not people are going to be good at this job. And so I'm going to throw out 99% to make myself feel better, and then look at this little stack here and choose from them.
Talking about education and how people look at the bachelor degree, but also looking at where you're coming from, universities, even 20, 30, 40 years later in your experience, we still look at if you're coming from the Ivy League or these big schools that you have kind of like got educated in. What is your take on this in terms of how important the bachelor degree is, or like the master degree is, to your experience or to what you can bring to a company? I know it's a very broad topic, so we can talk about it for hours, but like, if we want to summarize this, what is your take on this?
Yeah, I'm passionate about this topic too. From my own personal experience, I went to college. I thought about dropping out halfway through because I became an entrepreneur, and it was like, I really don't like my major. I'm not seeing the value here. I'm not learning a lot. I finished because I felt like I needed to. And I wonder about that for my kids. Will they need to? Not because of what they learn, but because of how they'll be perceived, right? And so that's the number one thing for me. Prediction wise, looking forward, today, I think it still matters. Tomorrow, I think it will still matter. 10 years from now, I think it will still matter to some degree. I just think the degree to which it matters is reducing, by the months and by the years. But beyond that, I also think that smart companies and smart leaders will just flat out get better at figuring out who's going to be great and who isn't. And we're going to throw all of this stuff out. But you know how the world works, right? It's slow. It's going to evolve, and there will always be some percentage of the companies out there, whatever, that are going to say, oh, well, I know that if they came from this school, or if they have this degree, or if they have this experience, they're going to be better than this person who doesn't. That's always going to exist, but there's going to be a growing faction of people who don't believe that.
How do you see, or how do you feel about diversity in companies, not only from gender perspective, but also from culture background perspective? And do you have any examples where this actually proved that it really works compared to companies that have really looked for lookalikes all the time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when you think about culture, background, where you come from, all of that stuff, and this is definitely controversial in some ways. So companies are, I think, also over indexing. Like, there's too much here where there are companies that are trying to check a box, as opposed to, I really want this, I really value this, right? And so that stuff bothers me. And we work with lots of companies to match talent. And so, you never want somebody who's qualified, that wants to work there, that's great, to be frankly discriminated against because of where they come from, regardless of whether, it's the typical background or diverse background, whatever. And so that stuff's a little bit complicated, but we see a lot of that. I think that, the arguments for diversity as a whole are amazing and kind of indisputable, right? Like, the more diverse thought you have, if you're listening, right, the better off you're going to be. And I think that it's an interesting topic. Right now, I think there is too much of companies trying to satisfy some requirement that came from somewhere else and check a box, and not enough genuine desire for unique thought, unique backgrounds, unique candidates.
I love this. I think diversity is definitely not a box to take, but something to embrace, and really is about finding diversity in so many different ways. Not only the gender, not only the background, not only the thoughts, it's everything at the same time. And the biggest trap that companies fall into is focusing on one aspect of the diversity, but then in everything else in these profiles that they're hiring, they look exactly the same. If you go back to, I don't know, the idea of Ivy League, they come all from the same environment. They know the same thing. So gender or background does not make sense anymore because they came from the same education background. And that's something that you want to also tackle and challenge as a company to succeed, because diversity help you if it's, as you said, genuine and smart and intelligent in the way that has been built, rather than just ticking boxes.
Yeah, and the other thing that's just hiding in plain sight is the lookalikes of experience, right? You did this job, this type of company, whatever. This is what we want. Give me the cookie cutter, right? And it's amazing. If you just look really, really clearly at this, and you open your eyes to it, you'll see how often that is the case, and it's astounding, really.
Talking about cookies and experiences, I recently chatted with someone that I really was impressed by and obviously hired. And he started his experience as a baker. This is where the cookies come from. And he did not like the entire waking up early at 2 a.m. to build, even though he was passionate about it. He moved from bakery to law enforcement, and he did not like that either. But in his spare time, he was doing data and coding. And today he's one of the most inspiring and impressive data engineer. And if you listen to his story, a lot of people will just drop off listening from that first moment of the bakery side, or will not even reach out to him because that's not the classical maybe path to get to data engineering. And this is the people that you want to look at, because passion is way more important sometimes than actually just the classical background and education.
Oh yeah, and I'll also say, if you really, sometimes you have to really pay attention. Even when, like you, I interview a lot of people and I love to hear about their stories and where they came from. And if you just look at a LinkedIn profile, you might think like, oh, this person's a marketing executive. They've always been a marketing executive. You go back to the very beginning, oftentimes it is completely off the wall. It is stuff you had no idea, you never thought they would have come from that, but they do, and it's just not front and center. And so you have to pay attention. One quick thing I'll leave you with here that is just totally comes to mind is, so my co-founder for Aspireship, his name's Jason Rydell, and he's a CTO. He spent 15, 20 years at PayPal, doing cool engineering things, right? I became friends with him just through our families and kids and stuff. And we were talking, and one day he told me, after we got to know each other, like, hey, I want to show you something. And so he whips out his phone and he shows me a YouTube video where he actually was featured. He was featured in a rap video. Why? Because he actually produced the beat. This is what he did when he was younger. And he said, yeah, I actually had my own label. I didn't make any money at it, but I worked so hard and all these crazy things happened. And eventually I had to give it up, for, being a family man and all that stuff. And I thought to myself, if this person has the guts to do this, he's going to be a great technical co-founder. And I asked him to join the company, and he's been amazing. And so this is the stuff you just never think about, but if you pay attention, it's amazing what you'll pick up.
Absolutely. I think we have a very similar story at Cascade. Head of engineering is an incredible DJ, and his tracks are so cool, and they are all on SoundCloud, and you really like it. And you actually think about, okay, he's in engineering, but actually he has all of this creativity on the side as well that could help him so much with looking at the world from a different perspective than just sitting on your computer and coding the entire day and your all experience. Maybe last question for our chat today. We're getting closer to the time. What is the most utopian world that you would imagine companies living in, and how that utopian world makes work for everyone, not only the employee, not only the employer? And how long would it take us to get there?
Yeah, interesting question. I think that I want to say that, there's a way in which people kind of, so you can never just say, hey, if I'm recruiting, if people are trying to get a job, Like, I'm just going to go into a completely open mind with every applicant, interview everybody, get to know their story. That's not real life, right? Like the balance of that doesn't make sense. But if we could get to a true system for at least the most common jobs, right? The most common types of jobs and types of industries, where we could validate some key things about whether or not somebody has a decent shot at being good in these roles and excelling and vibing with the company, that we then could go in with an open mind and forget about the other stuff, take it into account at some level, but forget about the other stuff and really just connect with people and see some of those things that we see in people, that fire and that attitude, and just the way that, wow, if I give this person the opportunity, like, they're not going to let me down. That to me is utopia. That makes work for everyone, because everyone's happy and everyone pursues things that they enjoy and finds good fits. And, we're not sort of shackled to this old way of thinking about your path in life.
Thank you so much for this, Corey. This is very good to hear and very inspirational. And I think this could make work again. So thanks again for the chat today. Very nice meeting you in person, and hope you have a great day.
Thanks so much, Karim. Good luck with the Strategy Factory.
Thank you.
All right, take care.